Good afternoon. My name's Emma Taylor. I'm the founder and managing director at Nimbus 90. A warm welcome to all of you joining us on our webinar series today. This is all about the 2021 trends. And thank you so much for joining the series both today and in the previous 3 episodes. This is the 4th and final episode in this series, where we've been exploring the headline insights for the year ahead that have come out of our annual Digital Trends Report 2021. We're exploring everything from investment, how to support your employees in changing working environments, adjusting to evolving customer behavior, and also how to drive recovery strategies in 2021. This episode, we're exploring how to drive recovery and growth, and I'm delighted to welcome our panelists for today. Angela Johnson-DeWitt, who is the Head of Risk in Tech Change for Lloyds Banking Group, Eddie Short, who is the Chief Data and Analytics Officer and Director Data Insights and Analytics at Telefonica, and also to James Maunder, who is the Chief Information Officer at the London Clinic. And they'll be sharing their thoughts on what recovery and growth may look like in 2021. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Before we dive in, I'd like to remind everyone that if you do have a question at any time, you can add it to the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens, and we'll get through as many of those as we can as they pop up. So let's kick off. A number of things came up during the 2021 trends, and also particularly in this 4th and final section. So I'd love to ask each of you briefly to introduce yourselves, please.
Hello, Emma. Hello, everybody. So I'm James Maunder, Chief Information Officer at the London Clinic. We are a private charitable hospital based in the centre of London. I think we're the largest single-site private hospital in town, founded in the 1930s with about 250 beds and about 2,000 members of staff.
Eddie, I'm going to hand over to you, please.
Yeah, sure. I am glad to be here. Eddie Short, Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Telefonica. You'll know us more likely as O2. Although we'll seem to be seeing, hopefully we're in the process of a joint venture with Virgin Media, which is pending regulatory approval, but hopefully for the summer of this year. Yeah, I'm right now doing a whole bunch of digital and data-driven transformations for our entire business, which covers 36 million customers and people all across the UK. But
Hey, Angela, would you just share a little bit more about some of the work that you've been doing at Lloyds, but also the previous work you've been doing?
Sure. So I look after technology change risk. I'm looking after anything that's changing in the technology space, looking a little bit at cloud. Before that, I worked at Deutsche Bank, Ernst & Young, and IBM.
Lovely. Thank you all so much. So this episode is all about the recovery and growth. How has your business dealt with the effects of COVID-19, and what do your recovery plans look like? Can I come to you, Angela, first, please?
Yeah, sure. So I think there's 2 ways of looking at this. There's ways of working and how we're operating, and then there's what we're doing from a business point of view. So I think from a ways of working point of view, it's all about, are you going back to the office or not? So our bank, along with, I think, a couple others have said, they're shrinking office space, whereas Goldman Sachs, as an example, has asked everyone to come back to work. So what that looks like, I think, is yet to be seen. And then I think from a business point of view, I think the market has shifted. Customers are changing the way they're working from a retail and a commercial point of view. And I think organisations that are able to respond to that are in a good position.
Thanks, Angela, so much. Eddie, to you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Angela. I mean, I think it's definitely been, you'd say, the last 12 months, and you can also throw in Brexit, but with COVID, it's probably been the greatest blue ocean and black swan combinations for 100 years, and certainly more than hopefully any of our in our lifetimes. I think we've certainly seen complete transformations, but most of the economy has held up. It's clearly been a real challenge in terms of those people who are purely, as it were, fixed based, and that's been particularly hard, I think, on retailers. But I think we have responded to this new challenge. Although I think I, for one, although I'm certainly not looking forward to going back to the office full time. These ways of working are very tiring. I think we've all found a new way of working, which has involved 12 hours a day looking at a screen. And although the technology's moved forward leaps and bounds in that last year, it's still finding us, I think it still finds it a fairly exhausting way of working. And yeah, I think it's exciting times, but I think it remains a challenge, and I think we still have to find what is our new normal. Hopefully that'll start to become more apparent probably through later in Q2 and into Q3.
Thank you, Eddie. Absolutely. What is that new normal? James, your thoughts then, please.
Well, similar to Eddie and Angela, actually. So we were a very traditional organisation. We were a business based on being very present. The view was we're a 24/7 hospital, and if you're going to deliver to the needs of the hospital, you have to be on site. Now, of course, for non-clinical staff such as myself, that changed almost overnight a year ago, and we've been finding a new way of working. I think as lockdown starts to ease, as hopefully it will in the next few months, we will move to very much a hybrid way of working, where if you're non-clinical, we'll use our limited office space far more wisely, and we'll expect people to be in probably about half the week and working from home half the week. I think more interestingly, for the hospital though, we've had to be incredibly agile, and we've had to learn agility as a skill set whilst maintaining clinical standards and patient outcomes. We suddenly became part of the NHS in March last year, and we were a fully fledged part of the NHS for several months through to September. And since then, we've been supporting the NHS whilst also bringing our private patients back into the hospital. So we've had to learn a whole set of new skills that actually I think will serve us very well for the future. I think as we come out of this, and and COVID's going to be around in some shape or form for some time yet, I think we'll all have to be very agile as we move forward.
Agreed. And for all of you, have you seen any businesses that have really stood out for dealing with the effects of the pandemic exceptionally well, particular industries or indeed organisations? Eddie, could I come to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think clearly the same thing, the banks and the telecoms companies, we've all done very well. But coming away from our industry, clearly it's been a boom time for delivery services, hasn't it? I think I think we'd all have been scuppered if it wasn't for Deliveroo, Just Eat, Ocado, and the variety of different organisations which are putting on dramatic scale. I think you have to look at some of the tech companies, and you have to tip your hat to Amazon. I mean, I think they have been awesome in this entire. Although even though I haven't been able to manage to deliver next day, they've had to give up on the next day commitment for Prime. But tech companies generally, and obviously I tip my hat also to James. I think the healthcare sector has been amazing. I think in terms of what it's had to do and transform and work differently, and ultimately the one thing that we've got right in this crisis has been the companies that have sprung up in terms of healthcare and biosciences and pharmaceuticals that have put the UK in a leading position in terms of vaccines. I think you say we haven't got a lot right, if Boris and the various leaders, but in that space we've tapped into something where we genuinely are world leaders in this country, and it's paid off. So that would be mine.
Very interesting. James, can I come to you particularly from that side of things?
Yeah, I would absolutely build on that. I think in the UK, all organisations, whether governmental, commercial, involved in the production, manufacture, distribution of the vaccines, I think has been an absolute triumph. And I think it's really interesting when you dig into why have we been so successful there. It was about the rapid mobilization of teams from across various different organizations who came together with one key focus to identify how can we use the knowledge we already have to get to a vaccine as quickly as possible and get it in people's arms as quickly as possible. And commercial imperatives were sort of secondary to that overarching principle. It really was, to overcoin a phrase, a moonshot, and it's played off really well. I think I would go somewhere completely different. Just one other area. I think it's really fascinating looking at, on the surface, similar businesses, some who have thrived through lockdown and some who haven't. And I, because I work in a hospital, I am actually in the office today. And it's remarkable how just in this area of Marylebone, there are cafes and restaurants open selling a takeaway service. they've shown flexibility, they've shown agility, they've shown a can-do spirit. There are other restaurants and cafes who haven't been open for a year. And I think there's a behavioural and a cultural lesson to be learned there for organisations big and small.
Absolutely agree. Angela, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, most of what I was thinking has been said. I mean, I think the investment banks probably enjoyed the volatility at the start. And then I think the tech and the telcos obviously have done well. I mean, Microsoft's CEO calls out that they've had 2 years of digital transformation in the space of 2 months last year in March and April, which I'm sure is true. I think companies that were able to work from home have obviously done okay, I would say. Those obviously that James mentioned that really need you to be, physically somewhere, have obviously been hit harder. But then there's been government support as well. So, that's been helpful, I'm sure. I guess the companies that, exactly as been said, are able to adapt are generally going to be put in a better position because the market has shifted. The way in which we operate has shifted. We as customers have shifted. The companies have shifted. Everything has moved. And I think watching that market and adapting accordingly are the companies that have been better set up, I would say.
Absolutely. So I'd like to sort of drill into one of the stats that came out of this year's digital transport, which is 65% of respondents said that they see the impacts of COVID-19 as an opportunity rather than as a threat. And from your point of view, what opportunities, if any, has the impacts of the pandemic presented for businesses, and how should businesses actually seize those opportunities going forward, do you think? James, would you like to start?
Yes, thanks, Emma. I build on what Angela's just said, actually. I think for us, this has given us a huge cultural kick. It really has, I think, moved culture within our hospital and also within healthcare more broadly along probably a decade's worth of change in a year. And I think there's an awful lot that we can capitalise on there. New ways of working. We'll use our office differently. The old conversation around, there's a big systems business transformation project that we need to get our heads around, and we were scratching our heads around how on earth are we going to find the space to house all the people we need focused on the office. Well, easy. We'll use one of the floors of this building, and the people who are normally there can work from home or work in a different way. We've also seen a lot of digitization or opportunities to digitize our interactions with patients, consultants and staff as well. So lots of things to build on. Something which I do want to touch on, though, is I think if we're going to make the most of these opportunities, we really need a new digital trusting style of leadership. And I think that will be a key differentiator between those businesses that thrive and are able to make the most of these changes and those that struggle.
Thanks, James, very much. Angela, thoughts maybe on that leadership and any other thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, it comes back to, a business point of view and the ways of working point of view. So from a business point of view, customers have moved online. They're not shopping on the high street, obviously, but they are shopping online. There's a focus on delivery, to the door, obviously. There's a focus on cashless. So they are, in the summertime when things open up again, there's obviously a move to cashless and having better transparency. I think from a banking point of view, being focused on customers' health and financial health is a big focus. And then obviously for the investment banks and the volatility that's been going on, are there more day traders? I don't know. That would be an interesting thing to look at as well. And then whilst that's happening, there's a whole lot of technology on the horizon, which is right there and upcoming. And I think preparing for that, I think, is a big one. For the digital point, I'd say yes. I think that I probably still, so I come from there's 2 points of view. So one point of view where a bank is a technology company, and another point of view where banks need to be supported by or enabled by technology, which is 2 different points of view. I'm not sure where my personal point of view is, but either way, technology is involved. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it pans out.
Eddie, your thoughts as well, please.
Yeah, well, I think just coming back to our values as a company are bold, open, and trusted, and I think it has been a wake-up call for leadership. After the lockdown 1.0, a number of our execs were basically saying, can't wait to get back to the office. And yeah, in fact, in the summer, I think I spent 3 days in the office between lockdown 1.0 and 2.0. And I think now people are seeing it's new, we are going through this transformation, and that means trusted does mean working differently. It doesn't mean to say, if I can't see somebody with the whites of their eyes and meet them face to face, that we can't operate. I mean, I think we still require, I think, as human beings, that face-to-face interaction, but in a different way. But I think it is going to be challenging for our leaders. And I think Goldman Sachs might be a bit of an outlier there than saying that they have this kind of apprenticeship culture and it requires face-to-face. But actually, I think that implies a lack of trust in how they operate and how their people operate. But what we haven't really worked through is if this new normal comes and it's like 2 to 3 days a week, or 50% in an office, it's not going to be really productive for people if they still spend that time in the office is spent majority of the time in Zoom or Teams calls. So it's kind of, how do you get this more collaborative workspace and using face-to-face interaction, which still I think largely does trump for those collaborative work meetings where you try to get groups of people together to interact on problems. You just cannot replicate that as well online. With actually, we still also want to work at home. So I think that leadership challenge is still to be worked out for a lot of organizations, but I think we've got our heads into it and we are excited about it.
And that's, I think, that mindset and that approach and that culture and bringing people with you, and that the whiteboardings and all of that, how do we get that to work if we have got people 3 days a week and they're not doing the same 3 days, except, there's so much to contend with and think about and get right. So lots on there. So if I can sort of drill into a couple of things that you've just talked about there, if we sort of almost take that next step, what do you think project planning will look like in the future? How can businesses adequately actually prepare themselves for uncertainty? So sort of that project planning shorter term, and then also how do you make sure that we don't see, or try not to see again, what we've seen this time, obviously a pandemic, very difficult to predict. Thoughts? I'm going to come to you, Angela, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's a massive topic. You've mentioned a lot of stuff there. So from a strategy point of view, where do you invest your money? What projects do you go for? So I think we need to, things haven't changed that much. I think you still need a business case. So you still need to be able to forecast, where are you going to get your money from, and how are you going to spend it, and does that all stack up, and does it continually stack up as you're delivering, ideally in an agile way. So I think if you're looking out for where you're going to get your money, it's got to be projects that are aligned to where the market is at the moment, and maybe it's aligned to a shift in where the market's gone, and you're taking advantage of that shift. So, and as an example, delivery, online shopping, cashless, whatever the oil price is doing at the moment, but thinking about those things that are shifting and then taking advantage of them quickly. So that comes back to this as a strategic point of view. That's sort of where I would be thinking about where to place my bets. And then from a delivery point of view, I mean, you're spot on. It has to be agile, and it has to be under control. And I think that is something that a lot of companies are trying to work out at the moment. How can you deliver quickly and have good control? So information's going up the chain in the right way, and there's also decision making is going up and down the chain the right way, but in a way that enables quick delivery safely. So that's a big challenge I think a lot of organisations are trying to grapple with.
Absolutely. And I think quarter by quarter, many are taking it at the moment, but actually we need those bigger, longer term plans. James, you're nodding your head, so can I come to you, please?
Yeah, this project management piece really fascinates me at the moment, as somebody who sort of grew up running waterfall projects in his comparative youth. I am a recent convert to a far more agile way of working. I used to work for an amazing woman at Oxford University Press called Kate Harris, and she used to talk about the world being VUCA, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And if it was all those things before COVID, it's going to be even more so post-COVID. And I think the challenge with traditional project management is, all too often, I think the project plan gives you an illusion of certainty, and that certainty actually doesn't really exist. And also, I think far too many projects end up serving the plan rather than the plan serving the project. So I'm a big fan of moving to a more agile way of working, where we have a long-standing enabled team running a program of work. Their responsibility is to deliver value, and they have the decision rights around what to work on next to deliver the most value to the organization, so that we shorten those communication, the length of those communication channels, and give the work and the decision rights to those best capable of making it. But I do take Angela's point. It needs to be done in a controlled way. And therefore, agile to me is a more disciplined practice than old-fashioned waterfall project management. But it absolutely has to be able to innovate and pivot very quickly in this VUCA world we live in.
I like that expression very much indeed. And I think value is absolutely key. Eddie, your thoughts, please, as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to build on what I completely get and agree with the agile model. I think sort of lessons for me is obviously a lot of our forecasting is obviously based on prior year and historical data, and say a lot of our machine learning models kind of, I'd say, pejoratively broke in March, April last year, because actually there was no historical basis for actually forecasting, and actually from a lot of our financial models, we're still kind of looking at, you know, what was the prior year, what's the prior quarter, and it's still you going, oh dear, we can't do that. So we have to look at that new normal. I think we do have a productivity problem in the UK, and we do have a disease about short-termism, and I think that's the downside risk of agile is you could end up being far too short-termist, and I think that's to James's point about meeting the plan as opposed to serving the outcome. So I think for us, agile is really important, but we still also just need to work differently and be cultural. Just because COVID's happened, I think we have to assume that it's going to be a once in a lifetime type of event. That doesn't mean to say everything should become short term. And we are going to have to think longer term about infrastructure. We've got all those large skyscrapers in central London. We need to think what's the economy and the business that we need in the medium term, as well as what we actually do need in the short term. So I think that strategic planning is going to become ever more important, along with agile delivery, so we can actually deliver results in a timely fashion.
Yep, a lot to be thinking about, as you say. Then we look at the infrastructure and what we're doing with cities and moving people and so on. So can I come into something which really looks at when our respondents felt that they were going to actually come back to recover to pre-COVID levels. So what we asked them was, when did they actually see and expect businesses to recover? So the majority of respondents expected the recovery in the next 3 years, and just 2% of respondents considered the recovery period to take 5 years or more. How can businesses make sure that they achieve this? What plans do they need to put in place? So just any further thoughts on what you've already said there. So how can they make sure they achieve that goal, either very much this year or into the next 2 to 3 years? Angela.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a tricky one, because there's folks that have been directly impacted by COVID, and then there's folks that have been indirectly impacted by COVID. So they're supporting the industries that have been directly hit. So it's hard. I'd say that the ones that have been directly hit, they just need, back to James's point, if they can do delivery, do delivery. If they can take advantage of anything, take advantage of anything. And then when things go back to normal, make sure that you're continually meeting those market demands and the changes in the market. And maybe think continually, even if you've just got a business, think sustainability is important to customers. How can I be more sustainable? So making sort of decisions around that. And for those companies that are secondarily impacted, I think just thinking about they can't shun away from who they've been supporting. They have to continue to support those organisations, but how can they too take advantage of some of the changes that are happening and seeing if they can make some actions that are going to be beneficial to them. So that's what I'd be thinking.
Thanks so much. Eddie.
Yeah, so I think my macro thing is, what went wrong, and probably after the financial crisis, is we had too many companies on life support, and being blunt about it, we have too many companies on life support now. What I see, certainly from our business, a lot of our small, medium businesses, which are often the engine of the economy, have been savaged by the last 12 months, and a lot of, but equally there's been great opportunities in terms of creative destruction. People actually just say that business is no longer viable, and have to do something new. And clearly we've seen that in some of the larger retail organizations. Frankly, some of the names like Dorothy Perkins or Topshop will remain, but frankly the business is gone. It's just a completely online operation only. And I think it's taking advantage of that creative destruction, which we need to make the balance right. And that's clearly a business and government challenge. I don't expect we'll go back to pre-COVID-19. There has to be a new normal. I think, you know, we can't cushion the challenge for everybody. There has been an economic shock. It's cost us £300 billion already. It took 10% off our economy last year, and so, you know, we have to then look at the opportunities that's created as well as the threats, and look at, you know, different is better. You know, so support the industries that we've been great at: fintech, insurtech, and biotech, actually. In my world, 5G, and then look at some of the things that are some of the sacred cows in this country, and just say, for once and for all, we're not very good at those things. Perhaps we should move on. But you add in, and just throw in the Brexit thing, it has created an additional challenge for, again, a lot of medium-sized companies, a lot of paperwork, which is going to be a drag on them. And so we do need to export more, and clearly, the number one thing we probably need is to get our, you know, more support for the service economy, because frankly that's our economy, and, you know, frankly, of course, that was ignored in the entire Brexit process. So we do need to, I think, continue as businesses to work more collaboratively with government and make sure government listens, and say, use this opportunity, which is once in a, you know, an entire century change, to actually look at how we can make the UK, you know, truly this wonderful place that we all want it to be, and as part of Boris Johnson's Nirvana. But, you know, it's going to be a longer journey. I think while companies can recover in the next 12 or 18 months, frankly, the economy does need to change, and that will take 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, so major changes and major ways that we've got to, and as you say, they're sacred cows, and, you know, taking off the sticky plasters, and there's a lot to have to consider from every angle, and to do that as sensitively and thoughtfully as we possibly can. James, to you, please.
Well, I agree with a lot of what's been said. I think the phrase "back to normal" is probably a dangerous phrase to use. I think we have to be looking forward, and I think we have to have the humility to look at the way we live, and the way we work, and the way we treat the planet that we all rely on for sustenance, and accept that pre-COVID things weren't brilliant. And I think I would urge organizations and individuals to take the good lessons out of COVID, and build a stronger future as a result of that. And you know, for organizations, that's all very well for me to say, because people will always need a hospital, probably. But I think for those organizations more directly impacted by COVID, I think it is about understanding what are the new needs of your customers. Is it a tweak that will sustain and grow? Is it more substantial change required to sustain and grow? But I would always urge any organization to conceptualize, to visualize, where do we need to be successful, and start at that point and work backwards to where you are now, because that will inform the first step to get to where you need to be to meet the needs of the organizations, and to do it in an innovative, lean innovation cycle kind of way. But I think that will be critical. The new normal, let's make it better than the old normal, would be my view.
Absolutely. And, you know, do we even want to return to the pre-COVID-19 levels? I mean, that's a big question in itself. So sort of very quick thoughts on that from each of you. Do we want to go back to pre-COVID?
Oh gosh, well, interestingly, I was reading a very provocative article earlier this morning that was talking about the society in which we find ourselves, where we work like heck so that we can earn money to buy things we don't need, and then we go back to work to repeat the cycle. I think not. I think there are all sorts of very interesting cultural changes that could and should come out of this, that will allow us to live productive, value-adding, but more fulfilled lives. You know, just, you know, being able to live and work with a different pattern will be really transformational for many.
As somebody who had anything between a 60 minute or a 2-hour commute, definitely don't want to go back to pre-COVID if at all possible. But I think, I think as businesses and organisations, clearly we do need to get to, you'd say, that new way. We have vast amounts of office space that we need to be creative in how we use it. We clearly need to reinvent our high streets, because they're going to, because they're not going to go back to any pre-COVID way of working. I looked at it and said, so they're probably the high street now is probably going to have a few banks on it, some telecoms companies, coffee shops and charity shops. That's basically what's going to be left, really. So it's kind of, I think we already said that's got to be different. But I think we have to just think it as to James' point. We got to think about the future and say, what do we want it to be? And the future is what we make of it, isn't it? And I think it's down to all of us as leaders to try and do our best to try and look at this is the future thing, and just being philosophical at the moment. The burden of all this is being passed on to our children and our children's children, because they're going to be people. And in the same way that, frankly, the Second World War was paid for by those people born after it, frankly, that's going to be the challenge for this. And they've got the additional burden of pensions and everything else. So we owe it to them to actually look at how can we make this a better place, that so they're not just burdened by hundreds of billions of costs that we've left them with.
Yeah, I mean, what was the boomer remover isn't the boomer remover anymore. We've protected them. So my wife, Eddie, would get on very well with you. But four quick points. So the first one is hours. I think the hours were a certain way before COVID. You had to build in for travel between buildings. You had to build in for commute. You probably had to build in to go and network in the evening. So there's only so much work you could do. I think we're doing way more now. So I want that to stop. That's not good. It's not healthy for our heads. It's just not great. The second one is around, what does a new normal look like? And I think it will definitely revolve around purpose-driven movements. So you go into the office, if you're going to be doing a workshop or something like that, you're going to be meeting with people face to face, you've got a bunch of networking to do, a bunch of coffees to have, it's about exactly what Eddie said. You can't go into the office and just spend the whole time staring at a screen. Completely defeats the proper purpose. The third one was around those war rooms. So I think they've got a big place. War rooms, project rooms, program rooms, big workshops where you come up with massive butcher's paper all over the wall and lots of sticky notes and bits of wool or whatever it is you might have. That has a massive place, because if you think about how we're working right now, I can only see, 50 inches diagonal of space. That's all I can see. Now, if we get virtual reality glasses, then I could virtually be in a war room. But companies can't afford that just yet. So because we can't afford virtual reality glasses for our war rooms, we need to physically be there. So I think that the new normal will be great, but I think it will be enabled definitely further by technology.
Yeah, and just coming on to something that's come into the Q&A, which is completely agree on the importance of agility going forward. What would your advice be for organisations that don't yet have those working patterns in place? Just any thoughts on that? Because I know we've got a couple of other things we'd like to cover as well.
I think the advice would be then you should be pushing to get them. Because I think the last thing you can do is stand still or just say hope that things will revert to normality. Again, as I've just brought the point, as leaders and people on this, you should be agitating and pushing and suggesting and driving for those different work paths. I couldn't agree more with Angela. I mean, we kind of what we do miss is kind of those short coffee conversations, those high interactions which are high touch, which for 5 minutes here could actually cover an hour, but then instead we replace that with 12 hours of looking at the screen. So it's you've got to drive to that new normal, look at how you can put the office in a different way, and it's down to us to make it. Don't wait for somebody else to help you do it, to tell you what it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I come from a similar background to James with respect to waterfall, which I really loved. And there's definitely a place that I think in big organisations it's needed at a certain level. But if you're a smaller organisation and you need to be nimble, then absolutely just shift your team in certified Scrum Master, certified Scrum and certified Agile courses, or just find some textbooks and read them, and then just start it. Start with maybe try 2 weekly sprints.
Thank you. So thank you so much for that. Can I just hone in on a couple of things? So two of the biggest challenges for organisations in 2021 are, respondents said, were dwindling market demand and also cash flow. So looking at technology strategy being seen as one of the lesser challenges for dealing with the impact of COVID-19, what do you think, why do you think that happened? Why was that technology strategy seen as that lesser challenge? Just some quick points on that.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I mean, for me, we're obviously supporting the NHS at the moment, which means, quite rightly, we don't charge the NHS what we charge private patients. So our cash flow is clearly under under stretch, and we're a charity, so we don't have any shareholders. All the money we make gets reinvested in the hospital, which is a really nice place to be. What I'm finding though is clearly the reduction in cash flow is having to extend the period over which the technology strategy will be delivered. That and finding ways to do things differently. So having fewer systems than the hospital is used to, moving to more integrated platforms that might not be exactly what everybody wants, but is good enough to achieve the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. So I think there is a link between cash flow and delivering strategy, but perhaps people see the cash flow as the prime concern, and the strategy as a kind of a product of that.
Yeah, I mean, I find this an interesting one. I think that why wasn't it a focus? So was it already in place? Was it straightforward and just invisible because they were just doing it? Or, was it ingrained in absolutely everything that's going on? And, they were talking about business strategy, but at the same time, the biggest component of the business strategy was the tech strategy. So they didn't talk about tech strategy because it was just a part of their daily strategy. They're not their daily strategy, but their strategic vision and directive.
I think my little build on that would be, not often the challenge on tech strategy is kind of still that business change element. I think it benefited last year because, frankly, there couldn't be any resistance to business change. It just freaking happened. It was enforced on all of us. So the fact that there was some technology that we could use was actually a revelation. And actually, I think that's why we generated the sort of 3 years of progress in 3 months. I think, though, that where we do get to now is the point at which I think is becoming more and more apparent, which is the well-being challenge, the fatigue challenge, that actually we could manage, but frankly, we do need to get to a new normal, which is not that completely where we've been certainly the last 4 or 5 months. So I think whilst it might not have been such a big issue last year, I think it probably still will be an issue, just actually getting everybody through to that next level. And to Angela's point, I think, VR headsets and new ways of augmented reality and collaboration, I think, are going to be things that people want to invest in as well as. I think that might have been a brief dip, but it might come back.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a couple of things I'd like to just make sure we finish with. So first of all, when we did our first episode on strategy investment, business model reinvention was very much seen at the top of the agenda for long-term planning. Do you think that invention or reinvention is necessary for survival?
I would say yes, because I think we've kind of been forced into a different way of working, but we can't go back to the old way. So I think you say that new normal, whatever that new normal is going to be a strategic reinvention of, you'd say, purpose, operation. So it's going to be a people, process, and technology thing, and that's going to be true for the majority of companies and majority of organizations, I think, to be effective in that new world.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. When I think of a business model, I think of a business model in response to a demand. It's like the supply of the demand. So if the demand has shifted, if the market's moved, if your customer base has changed, if those types of things have happened, your demand has moved, and what you need to service has moved, then most likely your supply side of it, your business model, will need to adapt accordingly. But I would always start with the customer.
Yep.
Thank you.
Emma, and I completely agree with that. I think the point around reinvention, I think businesses need to constantly reinvent, and to be fair, technology teams need to constantly reinvent as well. And to Eddie's point earlier around having organizations, businesses which were on life support before COVID, those are businesses which didn't reinvent. If we think about Topshop back in the 80s and the 90s, it just doesn't serve, its customers are in a different place now. And COVID will have been, COVID has been the death knell. But that organization needed to have reinvented way before. And we can think about examples in the past, Blockbuster Video, Kodak, Kodak Film, all businesses that didn't reinvent, and some actually who saw the future coming and went into denial and hoped it wouldn't arrive. This is a wake-up call for that reinvention, I think.
Absolutely. So, Mike, our last couple of quickfire ones are: do you do you think that organisations can be optimistic and should be optimistic about moving into 2021 and beyond?
Yes. Very quick answer. Yeah, there are lots of reasons to be cheerful. The vaccine is rolling out incredibly well. Even the first shot has had a huge impact on survival rates. I think there's a reason to be cheerful, but we've all got to be agile, curious, and find the new normal.
I'd agree. I think, yeah, we've got to be optimistic. I think there's the fact that we've got through, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel is great. The fact that we have seen some great super strides forward in terms of ways of working. I think they'll just recognise that it's going to be a bumpy road over the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm not going to go through the reasons why companies should be optimistic. I think that if you want to stay in business, you have to be optimistic. So even if you're thinking about all the negatives that are going on and if you're thinking about how terrible things are and all the threats, like, wrong mindset. Just stop, I don't know, go for a walk, do something, but you've got to come back to the office with a positive mindset, looking for opportunities and strengths and really working on how you can build and build and build, I think, and just keeping that positive mindset. I'm actually a believer that positivity attracts positivity, and that if you are a positive person, you will attract positive outcomes. And I do definitely believe that.
Yeah, thank you. So final point from reviews, because this has been invaluable, thank you so much, is since many recovery and growth plans are now more or less finalised for organisations, what do you think the #1 priority should be for businesses in 2021? What's that #1 priority? James, I'm going to come to you.
Find the new needs of your customers.
Thank you. Angela.
Yeah, customer focus again, and looking like why, back to James's point earlier, Encarta Encyclopedia or anyone that was selling an encyclopedia, when the Henry Ford was talking about, they just, if I asked my customers what they wanted, they say they wanted faster horses. But think really, don't necessarily focus on the customer, what they're saying, but think about it and think about what it is that they want and what it is that they need.
Thank you, Eddie.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's what your customers need in future as opposed to what did they need before. That's you say the great companies are the ones that don't just serve the need of their customers. They create the markets that their customers didn't even know they needed, and that's the thing probably that's created new opportunities with COVID. So I think customers.
Thank you all so much indeed. And I think that's our internal customers, our teams, our workforces, that sensitivity and so much more. Thank you all so much, Angela. Incredible. Thank you very much indeed, James and Eddie. Thank you all so much indeed.